Welcome to the Multifamily Investor Nation podcast. I'm your host, Dan Hanford. This podcast is unlike any other podcast you have been listening to. The guests on this show are true, active real estate investors closing real multifamily deals. Whether you are an active investor looking to up your game or a passive investor looking to learn more about how multifamily deals are structured, I promise you will thoroughly enjoy this podcast. So be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified of future episodes. For those of you that are interested in investing passively in these types of deals, in solid, cash-flowing multifamily deals throughout the Southeast, then visit my group, PassiveInvesting.com. Fill out the investor interest form. That's PassiveInvesting.com. If you've closed a multifamily deal in the past 12 months and want to be on this podcast, then send an email to Stacy@multifamilyinvestornation.com for details. Now let's get started.
Welcome to the Multifamily Investor Nation podcast. I'm your host, Whitney Elkins Hutton, Director of Investor Education here at PassiveInvesting.com. And I'm so excited today to be joined by our very special guest, Gino Barbaro. Gino, welcome to the show.
Whitney, thanks for having me on and congratulations on the book.
Thank you. Yes, Money for Tomorrow, How to Build and Protect Generational Wealth just landed on February 22nd on Bigger Pockets, and I couldn't be more excited. But we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about you and your apartment. 4 Sills, 128 units in Knoxville, Tennessee. Before we dive into that, though, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background in real estate, and where you're at in the multifamily space today.
I started my business back in the early 90s. Just give you a quick bio. I got into the restaurant business with my family. I had been doing restaurants since I was 8 years old. I'd been working with my dad since I was 8 years old. And in 2007, I remember him passing away and me sitting there and saying, do I want to continue this? Is it his dream or is it my dream? And I ultimately said, I don't want to be at the restaurant anymore. Something was missing. And when I looked at my bookshelf in 2008, early '08, I saw T. Harv Eker's book, The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. I picked it up and I read the book and it really, completely changed my world. All of a sudden, I wasn't blaming anyone. I wasn't the victim. I was responsible. The fruits are in your roots. Soon after, Joy Mentorships became educated in multifamily, said, I want to get rid of every other asset class. Let me focus on multifamily. I met my business partner, Jake, in 2009. Jake moved down to Knoxville in 2011, 18 months to find that first deal. It didn't happen overnight, a lot of mistakes. But fortunately for us, we got that first deal. 3 months later, we found our second deal. And I guess a decade later, we're at 1,800 units. And I don't want to say the rest is history because, man, it's been a long ride. It's been a lot of ups and a lot of downs. But it's been a fun ride, Whitney.
Are you a serious real estate investor looking to break into the multifamily space? Or are you an experienced multifamily investor looking to level up your game by meeting new passive investors and creating new partnerships? Have you heard of the MFINCon happening in Charlotte, North Carolina, June 12th through the 14th? The Multifamily Investor Nation Convention is a place to learn from over 60 plus high-level speakers and also to network with over 700 serious multifamily investors. If that's not enough for you, A-Rod. Yes, Alex Rodriguez, 12-time Major League Baseball All-Star with over $700 million of commercial real estate, including apartments, will be live and in person speaking at this event. Also speaking is the one and only Dr. Robert Cialdini, the godfather of influence and the award-winning author of the book Influence, one of my all-time favorite business books. Finally, we will have the CEO of Taco Bell, Mark King, joining us on stage to talk about leadership. Be sure to secure your tickets to this live in-person event as the tickets are going fast. Go to mfincon.com to find out more details. There are also sponsorship opportunities available for those of you who would like to have a booth at this event. For the details for this event and to purchase tickets, visit mfincon.com. You can use promo code MFINPodcast, all one word, MFINPodcast, to get $200 off tickets, and that's mfincon.com. Look forward to seeing you there.
Oh, awesome. And for listeners that don't know, you wrote about that ride in Wheelbarrow Profits. And so, you guys haven't checked that book out, that is one that I read early on in my multifamily investing career for sure. So let's dive into Forest Hills, 128 units in Knoxville, Tennessee. When did you close on the property and what was the purchase price?
Let's give some reference as before we close this deal. In 2021 and 2022, for those of you out there, it was challenging. We have buy right, manage right, finance right. We didn't want to do bridge debt. So for us, it was a struggle those 2 years, 100 units on average in 2021. 2022, we did 4 or 5 small deals totaling around the 150 units. So starting out 2023, I remember our property manager, Lynn, is sitting in the office and this gentleman, Ed, walks in and says, I want to sell my deal. Now, we own the units across the street from Ed. We had bought those units back in 2014. It was our third deal. We called them Park Place. And Ed owned the properties next door to us. And Ed, over the years, loved us because we were the ones who were proactive. We were raising rents. We were taking care. And all Ed had to do was sit back there and go, thanks, Jake and Gino. I like you guys. I don't got to do anything, and I'm raising rents. Well, the weird thing is he's owned these things for like the last 10 years. Our rents next door where our properties are, same vintage, same everything, we're at $1,200 and $1,300 for 2s and 3 bedrooms. His were at $700, fully leased. And we're saying to ourselves, Ed, what are you doing? And Ed is the prototypical mom and pop investor. And there are so many out there. Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, why would Ed come and ask to sell the property? Because Ed had talked to a broker and a broker had asked, I guess, an obscene amount of money for a fee to sell the property for a listing. So Ed said, you know what? I'm going to do it myself. I don't want the employees to know. I don't want my residents to know. I want to have a quick, seamless transaction. I know these guys, Jake and Gino, they've got about 1,800 units in the market. So I think I'm going to go to them and go directly to them. And it was one of those things where it's about time something fell our way. I mean, 2021 and 2022, like I told you, were difficult. And we started off 2023 with a bang. I mean, I can get into pricing and how we found the deal, I told you, but it was just one of those things where you're in the game long enough and you do the right things start happening to you.
Awesome. Okay. So 2023, you found the property off market. The owner of the property walks into your office. It's somebody that you've known for quite some time. Mm-hmm. You guys have a relationship with each other. And so it sounded like he wanted to save himself a little bit of money on the transaction, on the commission. So I know before the show, you and I were talking that you closed this property in March. When did this conversation happen? And what was the price that he was asking? And what did you close at?
Great question. We had started the conversation probably in December. He walked in during the holidays, and I remember walking in. I remember saying to Jake, get him on the phone ASAP. What does he want? Because, property managers, they're like, yeah, okay, we'll get back to you. So that's the person you drop everything you're doing and you get back to that person as soon as possible. I remember the price point was $8.9 million. That's exactly what we wanted. It was around, if you break it down at 120 units, what was about 73,000 unit around there. We had budgeted in $1 million in CapEx. So we brought the price point up to 9.9 million as far as the loan amount went. We can get into the loan proceeds that we use. We use the loan to cost on the deal itself. But I remember at that price point, and we like the 1% rule, 1%. The rents were averaging around $700 for this asset. He had 15 one-beds, but the majorities were 2 and 3 bedroom units. This asset should have been at least generating an average of $1,100 in monthly rents, but they weren't. And his problem was, I think he knew intuitively that if he went to another seller, it would be hard to finance this property at a certain price point. Let's say $100,000, $115,000 a unit. So he was able to say, you know what? I'm happy with this price. I got these rents. I don't have to do any work. I know that if I need to start raising rents, my renters have been in there for years. It's going to be a renter's ride. I don't want to do all the work. I just want to have a nice, happy, seamless transaction.
Okay, so you guys are excited to hear about this property. When you heard that he's selling, what was your overarching business plan here? I mean, something tells me that it's kind of a value add strategy, but what was your business plan?
Well, we knew right away the renters that we needed. Median income was great. It was over $100,000, the median income in the area. This is a 2005 build, brick, a vinyl siding. What we wanted to do with this property specifically was laundry rooms. The common areas were just not in great shape. We wanted to go and we needed to rehab all the units, cabinets, refacing, fixtures, flooring, all of that. We can get into that. I'm thinking specifically, the bones of the property were really good. But one thing we did do on the property is we had breezeways in the property, and we have breezeways in other properties. We ended up putting vinyl siding on the breezeways in every property to protect them. Because every 2 to 3 years between the scuff marks and the holes in the sheetrock, it was a nightmare. There's 14 breezeways. At this point right now, we're done with 12 of the 14 breezeways. We're doing it in-house as far as part of CapEx, but it's something that it just looks totally clean. We've seen it on other properties that we've bought and taken over, and we're like, we should do that on this property. So we're doing it on this property. And we, like I said, allocated $1 million for CapEx. We're down to about $120,000 left in CapEx. Out of the 128 units that we've acquired, 108 have been repositioned fully. So we've got about 20 left to continue. 108 are on our current lease. When we took over the property, rents, we were collecting about $900,000 a year. That's going to be going to about $1.8 million. We're going to be doubling the rents on this, the income on this property. Because once again, there was no rubs in the property. There was no late fees in the property. We do something called non-refundable move-in fees. So there's income in there as well. So there's a lot of different value add components. But as far as what you're saying with the value add strategy, we were spending between $5,000 and $7,000 per unit to turn units. And it's a little bit less expensive for us because we're vertically integrated. We have the CapEx crew and we manage the property and the processes ourselves.
I'm really interested. I want to stay here just a second on the breezeway part before we dive into due diligence.
Mm-hmm.
So is this like the units were accessed interiorly and then you just essentially removed the doors and made it a breezeway?
No. What it is if you look at the buildings themselves, they're built like this. There's a hallway in between and there's doors and then there's stairs going up. And there's the breezeway. And at the end of the breezeway, they're usually closed and they have laundry rooms. So all these walls are completely exposed. So every time somebody moves out, it's like a hallway. It's an exterior hallway. And people are always with couches and whatever, bikes and whatever. And we see it on other properties. And the concrete is great. We glaze the concrete, we seal the concrete, but the walls after 2 years, they look like, for lack of a better word, it looks like Chernobyl. It looks like people just have destroyed it. If you want to continue to paint and do whatever, and hardy wouldn't look good there. We were thinking of putting hardy plank there, but the hardy just doesn't look good with the brick on the outside. Hardy's a lot more expensive. So, we put vinyl, and if they rip a piece of vinyl, we can always replace it. So it's actually a pretty affordable way of keeping something, making it look durable and making it last, actually.
Yeah, that's such an interesting idea. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, I'm going to move on to due diligence. Okay, so this property is off market. You guys have a lasting relationship, a long-term relationship with the seller. You said that he didn't really do anything to the property during the whole time. So let's talk about physical due diligence. Were there any surprises there?
The property, like I said, had good bones. We just knew that every unit hadn't been turned in 15 years. It was practically a lot of the stuff was built. As far as the cabinets were great. The whole bases were great. The boxes were great. We just wanted to finish and fix the kitchen cabinet doors. The flooring had to get done. Obviously, new painting, fixtures inside. Like I said, the package was between $5,000 and $7,000. And a lot of the AC units were still in pretty good shape. So those we haven't really had to change as well. As far as the physical, not much. Laundry rooms needed the work, obviously. We were lucky. This one didn't have a pool and it didn't have a clubhouse either. I would say it's like a B- area, and it's probably an affordable housing C kind of product. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. The office, they had one single office, so that was really not a problem as well. But the majority of the work had to be the interiors. We had to go in and tackle every single one of those interiors.
What about financial due diligence on the property? Any surprises there?
Well, you see the paper here, that's where he had his T12s and his rent rolls. So it was one of those things where when you deal with mom and pops, they try to do the best they can. And we're fortunate that we have a great relationship with our community bank. The community bank knows our property, has that actual property next door. So they're seeing what the rents are there. They're seeing what the expenses per unit are there. So we're underwriting on a pro forma base we know we can buy it for. And it was actually very interesting. We bought the property for $8.9 million. It appraised for $15.2 the same day we bought it. Reposition post, because the bank knew once you're getting rents up to $1,200 and $1,300, it's an absolute home run for them. So it was just executing all of those turns. And would we have been able to do this during the height of COVID, being able to turn almost 100 units in less than a year? Probably not. It would have been a much riskier project to do that. But we had at least a loan term on this. We were able to get 80% of the financing built into the loan. And we also have 2 years of interest only on this with a 5-year term. So even if it was during COVID, we had at least enough of a run up where if our debt decided to expire, we had at least 5 years before that risk happened.
All right. So I do want to talk about the debt, but before that, so what was your contract? It sounded like there was no other competition here. So how did you frame your contract in order to seal the deal?
We basically said, we'll draw up the contract. Another one of the mom and pops that doesn't want to spend money with the attorney. And it's great. And if you can draw it up yourself, you can control the transaction. You can put in whatever you'd like. And then obviously whatever they want to put in or take out, it's great. So we drew up the contract ourselves. It was just a basic contract. It's one of those, Whitney, where I remember it was a Friday afternoon. We're like, Lindsay, get the contract done by Monday. We want to have a contract in his hands by Monday. Because like you said, sometimes things seem too good to be true. And this deal seemed too good to be true after 2 years of hunting for deals. What's the chances, the likelihood of somebody walking into your property saying, I want to sell 128 units at, half of what I think it's worth? Technically, it doesn't happen. So when you get that opportunity, you try to do whatever you can. Hell and high water, you move and you go to your attorney and say, please get the contract done. Sent it over to him. And there weren't any real hiccups. The only thing that we wanted on this deal was to get an extension for financing, just in case our community bank stalled or they had to go to committee or whatever it was. But it's interesting because over the last 12 to 18 months, I don't know if you've noticed it, but we just did an assumption deal. Assumptions, they typically take 6 months to do it. This one was done in 60 days because I guess the agencies don't have that much. They don't have that much on their plate right now. So it's like move time. But 2023, things were still really active. We weren't sure. So if there was only one stipulation we put in, we just put in an extension on the loan itself, on the deal.
Did you have to put down any earnest money for this project?
Put down 1%.
Okay. And was it hard or did it go hard after?
It went hard. I'm sorry. It went hard after 30 days of due diligence. Yes.
Okay.
But like I said, it's very difficult to get due diligence on docs that he really doesn't have. It's really basically walking the property, getting your inspection report. Nothing egregious came up. At that price point, you aren't going to go back to the seller and say, hey, can you replace these windows? Or there may be a roof that's leaking. You just say, you know what? We'll chalk it up. We can handle that with CapEx.
Hey guys, it's Dan Hanford. I wanted to take some time to introduce you to our group at PassiveInvesting.com. We are a national private equity real estate firm based out of the Carolinas. We focus on acquiring institutional quality apartments and self-storage facilities. We do this with private accredited investor funds and have a portfolio of over $700 million in assets and control over $250 million in equity from our investors. PassiveInvesting.com makes it easy for you to start investing in real estate without all the hassles. We even have an average 62% repeat investor rate in each offering that we put together. In addition, we also have a real estate debt fund that offers hard money loans to local fix and flippers across the U.S. called RehabWallet.com. It currently has a 0% default rate. To help you learn more, we have put together a free passive investor guide that outlines the 7 red flags for passive apartment and self-storage investing. Visit PassiveInvesting.com/red flags to download the PDF now. That's PassiveInvesting.com/red flags.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about the financing. You've already alluded to some of the terms here, that it was an assumption deal and that you had, a little bit of runway left on the interest only, but let's just kind of put a pretty bow on it. Was it a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac type loan? Was it?
Nope. This loan is a new loan. I was talking about the loan we did with our sale that we had this week. This loan was an 80% loan to cost. It was a recourse loan. It was done through a community bank. Interest rate was 6%, 2 years interest only. It was a 5-year term, 25-year amortization. And what I love about it is after 2 years, it's a step down. I think it's a 3-2-1 step down. So after 2 years, even if we have to pay a 2% fee, that 2% prepayment penalty, it's still really doable because our goal is at the end of the year, hopefully rates go down, maybe mid 4s, low 5s. We'll just take that and go to agency, go to Fannie and Freddie and refi it out there. If not, we'll just continue to hold the loan until rates become more favorable for us.
Awesome. And so you talked about the prepayment penalty. Easy for me to say.
You don't want to pay it, do you? I got you.
I stutter on that, right? So during this time, was the lender escrowing for additional funds for a future rate cap or anything like that? Okay, no. Good. No. That's good for you. And let's talk about how you closed the deal, how you got the down payment. We were talking a little bit before the show that you guys didn't do a traditional syndication raise. How did you structure this deal and get it closed?
What we've been doing for the last several years, Jake, myself, and another partner, Mike, have been doing our deals internally. After our last syndication back in 2019, we've been able to fund our deals through refinances, through sales, stepping up. And this one was no different. And what we ended up doing with this one was we ended up carving out 10% and allowing our employees to invest in a deal. Anyone who's been with us for more than 2 years, we call it the Golden Ticket Club. They're able to invest. And it's amazing because we don't believe in 401ks. We hate the traditional plans. We believe in multifamily. And what's awesome, more than anything, is when you have a property manager coming to you and saying, we need to raise rents. They finally get ownership and they understand because they've been in 2 or 3 deals. They've got the refinance checks. We had a property manager, private maintenance tech. His name was Josh. This was in September of 2020. Remember closing this deal. He invested $6,000 into the deal and his wife was like, I don't want you to invest. It's risky. He's like, babe, I'm going to invest. A year later, we refied out and he got $15,000 check. And she's like, Josh, why didn't you invest more money? And he's like, really? So it's so great to see people working on the property, actually profiting from the property, and they have ownership. And that's what's awesome. And for us to continue to be able to do that with our employees, to say, hey, you're working more than 2 years, invest in the deals side by side with us. There's no fees, dollar for dollar. There's no acquisition fees. There's no asset management fees. To us, I think it's a huge bonus. To them, it incentivizes them. And I think all of our objectives, they all align. And I think once they get that refi from the property, they get their money back and they're able to go into the next deal with us.
Awesome. So how are you guys splitting the cash flow and the equity on the deal?
Dollar for dollar. Let's say Whitney brings in 20%. I bring in 20%. We split it pro rata based on equity that we bring in.
Awesome. And then who brought the down payment then on the property? Are you guys splitting that pro rata or was that?
We're splitting that pro rata as well. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit since we don't really have much to talk about in the raising capital side or that part of the transaction. You closed this deal back in March. How did the first couple months of takeover go?
Whitney, I would say, let's talk about even the raising the capital part. I think that's an important component because even though we didn't raise capital, I think most capital raisers get it wrong. They don't talk only about the deal. That's all they talk about. They don't talk about the story behind the deal. They don't talk about how Jake and Gino started with this 25-unit property. They don't talk about their origin story. They don't talk about their why. They don't talk about their specific avatar, the specific person that they're going to speak to. Now, if Jake and myself, we started investing and started doing syndications back in 2018 and 2019, for us, it was a little bit easier because we created the platform. We had an education platform. We wrote a best-selling book. For anybody out there raising capital, the first thing I think you need to do is, who do you want to speak to? And for me, starting out, I'd be speaking to pizza guys. Anyone who had a small business, anyone who is struggling with their small business, anyone who wanted to create other streams of revenue, I speak their language. And I think that's what you do when you're raising capital. You don't have to be everything to everybody. If you're in the military, speak to people who are first responders and military. If you're a doctor, well, go out and speak to other physicians. If you're a pharmaceutical rep like Jake, well, talk to other sales professionals. I think that's the mistake, that when you're starting to raise capital, be everything to everybody. I think the other thing is people have to start to trust you. And I think one way that they trust you is that you're vulnerable with them. And what do I mean by that? I mean by sharing your story, sharing your origin story of why you got into multifamily, what was the seminal moment, and why they should trust you with their money. I think if you can, I don't want to use the word convince, but if you convey the message to them. And for myself, getting into multifamily was simply, I just wanted to create more income for the family. I had 6 kids, and unfortunately, they all like to eat, and that costs a lot of money. I didn't like being at the restaurant, so I saw this creation of wealth through multifamily. I love the journey, but if you dig deeper, it was more of creating impact for others for me. I mean, for me, it was, okay, this is great. My father was my role model at the restaurant. I wanted to continue that legacy of him teaching me and him creating impact for me. And for all those customers that came into the restaurant, I wanted to do that with multifamily, and I wanted to do that with the Jake and Gino community. And if you can share that with people you're raising capital from, and also be completely curious and interested in them, should they even be investing with you? Do they have the risk tolerance? Do their goals align with your goals? And it's okay if they don't. You've made a connection. That person remembers you and likes you. They may know somebody that they can introduce you to. Don't always go into a capital raising thinking that you need to get something out of it. Just be curious, have a great conversation, have a great connection, and I think the rest will take care of itself. Now, I forgot what the question was, but I think capital raising is often thought of as a numbers game where I got to speak to so many people. And I think that's a fallacy. I think that waters down the brand. I don't think you have true connection. I don't think you have true purpose at that point. And I think if you really want to create impact for others, especially in this business, try to align yourselves with people who need the opportunity you're presenting to them. And there's a lot of people who need it because doctors cannot invest in multifamily if they're neurosurgeons. They just can't at a high level. They need operators like you, operators like us in the space to be able to help them build their wealth and get it out of the system, get it into our system.
I couldn't agree more. I want to draw out a word that you said there multiple times, connection, right? Because that when you have a strong connection, it's easier to build that know, like, and trust factor. And that's something that Dan Hanford, one of our managing partners, is constantly talking about. And I love the fact, like, stick in your wheelhouse, right? You were talking to small business owners, Jake is talking to, sales representatives. I mean, it's easy. That's an easy way for you to create that connection and solve real problems for them. So I love you pointing that out. All right. So the question that I actually had on the docket for you, Gino, is since you closed back in March, how did takeover go? I mean, you knew this property pretty intimately, but like there's always surprises after, somebody operator takes over a property. So was there anything that came up for you?
It was a very challenging close and our first couple of months because rents were at $700 and they have to go to $1,200. And people were in their apartments forever. And it's actually interesting how the psychology has changed over the past 10 or 15 years because renters now think that they own their apartments. So when you go in there and tell them, I'm not renewing your leases because everyone's on month to month, all of a sudden there became a ruckus. And it's interesting because if you go try to find apartments in Knoxville for $700, you're not going to find any apartments in Knoxville for $700. And actually, we're still probably under market at $1,100 to $1,200 with the service that we're delivering. So those first couple of months were very rocky. What we would have done differently was we would have said, here's 17 buildings. Let's do a couple in this property, in this building, and a couple in this building to spread it out. And then ended up happening was there's a mini renters revolt. They got really pissed and really upset and really mad. I guess rightly so. But at the same time, if we have to be completely honest with ourselves, if I kept rents at $700 with the debt that I had on this property, we would be losing money and we'd be giving the keys back to the bank. That's what I think renters don't understand. Just between the insurance, the property taxes, and the maintenance on the property, it's more than $700, then more than the $700 rent per unit that they're paying. And that was the difficult part. What I would say to everybody, have a clear plan. You can't have this mass exodus on these large properties. It has to be systematic. For us, we had month-to-month renters. So we thought, hey, this is great. Let's go. Let's try to, vacate as many as we can. Because when you're going from $700 to $1,200, you cannot give them a rent increase. You have to not vacate, basically. You give them a non-renewal because they just can't pay the vast majority of them. Hey, if you'd like to stay, we're renewing this apartment here. We had some people transfer over to newer apartments. Some people did that, but a lot of them were just stuck with that mindset of I'm paying $700. I'm do this. This is my right. And it created a conflict and a couple of residents coming in, threatening, throwing keys back at the property managers. You're going to get some of that. It was challenging the first couple of months, but after 6 months, things quieted down. And now we're actually getting, hey, these guys are doing a great job. The laundry machines are actually working. Actually, somebody's coming to fix my stove. People are being responsive to what I need. So I think that's what we're ultimately trying to get on this property is that great customer service.
And that's so important, right? To demonstrate that value. We're going through a transition at one of our properties, the one that my husband and I owned. And we have one renter that wants us to decrease his rent by over 25%. And when we had the conversation with him, I was like, hey, listen, you're not paying property taxes. We do that for you. We'll pay for the structural insurance. We make sure everything's in repair. You don't have that on your plate. You're getting all these additional amenities that you wouldn't have if you moved to a different location. We're going to work with you. Let's find a win-win here. And, at the end of the day, if they can't afford it, they can't afford it. But it's really about providing you as an operator. At least this is the mindset that we have. And it sounds like we have a similar mindset. You demonstrate the value, prove the value. That can be rewarded. for sure in the market.
All a renter has to do is just go online, take them 3 minutes and just do an apartment search. Go to apartments.com. You'll see what everyone else is paying. And if you think that Whitney's unit is too expensive, I get it. It's great. That's part of what I like about capitalism. Go down the street and move out and but they can't find it because you're at market. We're below market now. And people are like, oh, and it's a great location. I mean, like I said, median income of $118,000 and you're paying $700 for rents. That's practically unheard of. But like I said, there's an emotion component to it. So you have to have a certain emotional intelligence that works along with, hey, you have to be empathetic to them. They've been paying this. Now, all of a sudden, they're going to get priced out of a unit that they've been living there for years. So there's a difficult component. But at the end of the day, we have investors who are employees. We have ourselves and our families, and we have the company itself who this asset is working for. So there's that component. So you just have to, I guess, balance all of those out and try to do the best you can.
Well, Gino, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us here today. If people want to find out more about you, where can they do so?
Just go to jakeandgino.com. Got podcasts, blogs, articles, the how-to show as well. Just go visit the website.
Awesome. Well, Gino, again, thank you so much for sharing your time with us here today. We look forward to hearing about your future deals.
Thanks, Whitney.
Thank you for listening to the Multifamily Investor Nation podcast. I trust you enjoyed this episode. Take a moment right now to leave us a review and let us know what you learned. Also, don't forget to visit passiveinvesting.com and fill out the investor interest form to invest alongside me in excellent multifamily assets located across the Southeast. That's passiveinvesting.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.